In this video, we'll be taking a look at how to output your renders. We'll go ahead and open up our Still Life version 4 in the Lighting Projects scene folder. And we will see this scene. It has one camera, that's the perspective camera. We're going to create a new camera. Let's go ahead and hit Control A for the channel box. We'll call that RenCam for a render camera. Go ahead and position a very quick composition. Let's go ahead and turn our light display off in our view panel real quick. And we'll open the attribute editor, Control A or Command A if you're on a Mac. We'll go on a nice short lens, let's say 16. And let's get to about here. Okay. So here's our composition. We're going to select the camera, and in the channel box we will lock it down so we won't accidentally move it. Now in the perspective window you can take a look at where everything is. All our lights are in position. All we need now to do is render. Simply pressing the render current frame will give us the render view, which gives us that frame rendered out. The render view is a very simple window. You're able to save your image by clicking on Save Image. You can even open an already created image to take a look at it in the render view. The buffer buttons, that is keep image, that puts the image into the buffer, and that will delete the image. Now I've got several images in the buffer already. We'll go ahead and hit the trash can icon to get rid of those. And I'll hit the keep image button. That allows you to render new windows. Let's go ahead and render this view for comparison's sake. And because we kept that other image, we can toggle back and forth and compare those two. This is extremely useful for when you're making changes in lighting or camera or anything like that. Let's go ahead and open up the attribute editor. What we'll do now is we'll take one of these. Actually, let's take both of these lights and temporarily disable them. Now I'm going to go ahead and just hit delete for right now, just for a quick show. And I'll re-render by pressing the redo previous render button in the render view. Well, I see I've made a mistake. I'm on the other camera, the old camera. Let's go on this render view and press the render button. Now you can see when we go back and forth, you can really start to see how your changes affect your renders very quickly. Let's hit Control Z for undo a few times until we get the lights back, and we're back to this render. One of the good things about the render view is you can specify an area where you can create changes and only render that area, and it doesn't have to calculate the rest of this, only by pressing this button. That saves a lot of time and allows you to render just that part. You see, we've already added the lights back into the scene by undoing everything. The image that was already in the render view was the darker image. You can see it only had to render that part to see the changes we've made in the scene. Now, about outputting your renders to an animation. What we'll do right now is create a very quick animation. Let's go to frame 1 here. And we'll set keyframes on our camera. Let's unlock our camera. Let's press Shift W and Shift E for setting keyframes on translate and rotate. And we'll go to frame 45 and I will move the camera back. Let's watch what happens as I move it back. And I will rotate the camera. We'll tilt and we'll move it down a little bit. And I will again press Shift W and then Shift E, and that will set a keyframe. Let's set our range just to our 45 frame animation, and this is the animation we have. Now, how to output this to a frame sequence is quite easy. You wouldn't want to keep rendering frame by frame and hitting save image. That's just daft. First thing we'll do is open the render settings window. The render settings window holds everything we need to know for our render. It's separated into tabs. At the top, you'll see the render layer, which is a more advanced rendering technique. And render using allows you to change the renderer that you have in Maya. And you have, of course, Maya software, which we'll be using now. But you'll also have options for hardware, hardware 2.0, and mental ray. We'll stick with Maya software for now as we take a look at how these render settings affect our renders. If you want to render the full 45 frame animation clip, all you need to do is go to frame animation extension and change it from name.extension, which always assumes just a single frame, to name.number.extension. This format gives you the scene name. By default, the image will be named the scene name, still life VO4, dot frame number dot IFF. IFF is the extension, is the file type, and we'll take a look at that. The file type, or the image format, is by default set to Maya IFF. We'll go ahead and change it to something we're a little bit more familiar with. We can make JPEGs, we can make TIFFs, we can make Targas. The big difference between using a JPEG and using a TIFF or a Targa is that the TIFF and Targa will contain an alpha channel. An alpha channel will allow you to composite a little bit easier. I'm going to go ahead and temporarily turn off our background, and I will render a single frame in the render view. No background means that there's nothing back there. This is all black. The alpha channel is a solid mat of where the objects actually are. Where there's no objects, the alpha is black, meaning it's fully transparent. When you composite or overlay this image onto a background or another image, the other image will come right through where there's no alpha. Now, alpha needn't be black and white. It can also be any shade of gray in between. The brighter that gray is, the more of the foreground will show through. In the render view, you click this for the color view, and you click this for the alpha view. If you render to a JPEG, you will not get an alpha channel. You will need to go out to a TIFF or a Targa. I prefer TIFF. We'll go ahead and do that. We'll keep the background off just so we can have that alpha channel. Now, frame padding is important for organization's sake. As you can see up here, as I change the padding, the numbering changes. I prefer to keep a frame padding of 4. That inserts extra zeros in front of the number, which makes the file naming a lot easier to look at in Windows Explorer or Mac OS X Finder, because it becomes a much more uniform name. We'll set our start frame to 1 and our end frame to 45. By frame will tell the renderer how many frames to go. By frame 1 will mean it will render every frame. If you want to render every other frame, you go by frame 2. We'll leave this at by frame 1. This is helpful for when you want to do test render of a long sequence, but you only want to see a few representative frames, and then you can set this to something like every 15 frames so that your test render is quick and you're not wasting time rendering a lot of frames. Here you want to tell it which render camera you want, and we want the Ren cam, otherwise it will render the perspective view, which is not what we want. We'll want the alpha channel output, we'll leave that on, and the image size will control how big of the output that will be. 640 by 40 is standard VGA. Let's say we're fancy schmancy and we have a nice HD TV. We'll want to do HD 1080. A smaller form of HD is called HD 720. And that gives you still a pretty nice large frame. What this does, however, is changes the camera aspect ratio. Let's go back to our 640 by 480. This will give us a square render. If I render this out right now, you'll see a 1:3 ratio aspect of width to height. The width is 1.33 and the height is 1. That's the ratio. If we change to HD, let's go HD 720. And let's render this again. Let's put this in the buffer before we forget. You'll notice that not only will we render a larger resolution, but we'll change our aspect ratio. And we'll see more on the left and the right than we will in here. We'll see less on top and bottom than we do in our 16 by 9 ratio. You see quite a bit of the bottom is cut out. In the camera attributes editor, you'll need to see where the edges of your render will be. And this is under display options. Under display options, you want to turn on display resolution. You'll see a little bit of a white line shows up. We're going to go into overscan now, and we'll put a small overscan, 1.1. What that does is it allows the view, only the view, to overscan or give you a little bit of extra room outside of what will actually render. We go back up here. I'll toggle the display resolution on and off. What's in the box will render. What's outside the box will not render. This is so you can have a better view of your scene without having to move the camera around. Let's go to an overscan of 2. You can really see the rest of the pedestal, but again, only this part will render out. Our animation is this still. We still have that. Let's go to frame 10 and we'll render this out. Now we have a bit of a disadvantage. If we take a look at our zoom is 0.703, we're not looking at a full image. So it's difficult to gauge the quality of the render. If you click 1:1 in the render view, now you'll see a full resolution. You can use Alt and middle mouse button to move around this view to see the rest of your image. For the sake of clarity, what we'll do in the render settings window is we'll go half the size of a 720 HD window. We'll click on maintain width and height and we'll type in 360, and that will give us a smaller render window that we'll be able to see in the video a little bit easier. Plus it'll be faster to render. Our aspect ratio is still the same, 16 by 9, which is typical HD TV resolution. We'll go back to the render settings, and that will do it for the common tab. This shows us the output options, the type of file you want to output, the frame range you want to output, and the size you want to output. In this video, we took a look at our output options using the render settings window.